and thank you everyone for being here today. As Stan said, my name is David St. Hilaire, and I'm the Vice Chairman of the Benedictine College Republicans. And the rest of the Republican Club and I are very excited to be able to bring you today's speaker. I have the privilege of introducing to you a former United States Senator and presidential candidate. Rick Santorum is a native of Pennsylvania, where he was elected to 2 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives and 2 terms in the U.S. Senate. During his time in Congress, he became known as a champion of the unborn, authoring bills such as the Partial Birth Abortion Ban Act. Senator Santorum has spent his career in politics, fighting for the rights and successes of the American family and the American worker. It was for these reasons that he ran for president in 2012. During his presidential campaign, Senator Santorum spoke passionately about his belief that strong families help produce a strong economy. He shared his views that we must expand opportunities for all Americans by encouraging incentives for marriage, children, and free enterprise. He stunned the nation with his improbable come-from-behind victory in the Iowa caucuses and his unexpected second-place finish for the Republican nomination. Since then, Senator Santorum founded Patriot Voices, a grassroots organization that is committed to finding ways to restore the American dream for hardworking families across the country. He is also the CEO of Echolite Studios, a fast-growing faith and family film company. Rick and his wife Karen are parents to 7 children. On the campaign trail, Americans fell in love with Santorum's beautiful youngest daughter, Bella, who was born with a rare genetic condition called trisomy 18, and who wasn't expected to survive past her first birthday. Just like her father, Bella has defied all the odds and is now 7 years old. The Santorum's eldest daughter, Elizabeth, is with us today as well. As all of my friends can attest, I've been one of Senator Santorum's biggest fans here at BCE the last few years. And I have the books, pictures, and sweater vest to prove it. As a student who aspires to work in politics someday, I have truly been inspired by Senator Santorum. He has been proof to me that it is possible to remain true to my Catholic faith and beliefs while serving in our nation's government. And while I'm sure he doesn't remember me, I met him several years ago on the March for Life. And it was then that I first had the idea of inviting him to come to Benedictine College. Well, 2 years later, and many, many emails later, he's finally here. And special thanks to Carrie and Nancy and everybody else at Patriot Voices who worked so hard to make this happen. But without further ado, here to talk to you about religious liberty, faith, and politics, former U.S. Senator and 2012 presidential candidate, Rick Santorum.
Had I known this was such a beautiful place, I would have come early. This is really special, what you have here. And so it's great to be here in Stanton. Thank you very much. I personally have never had any problems with President Minnis. The interactions I've had have always been very positive. I just want the student body to know that I think his interaction is unique. So it's great to be here. I'm looking forward to, anytime I come on a college campus, I almost hesitate to give a talk because it's always more fun to have an interaction and question and answer. But I will share with you a couple of thoughts and then open up for questions. Last night I actually spoke to a group of about 1,100 high school kids in Arlington, Virginia, for the what's it called, the Junior States of America. I think it's gone. Some of you may have participated in that. It was not a conservative group. Let's just put it that way. And one of the things I spoke to them about, they asked me to talk about something that I thought was an important issue that isn't getting much attention. And I said, we need to talk about the religious liberty in America. As David mentioned, I run a movie company. I'm the CEO of Echolite Studios, and we partnered with a group called the American Family Association to produce a movie called One Generation Away, and that came out through our movie system this fall. And it's a movie which, at the end of the movie, has Ronald Reagan's speech about how we have only one generation away from losing our freedom if we don't stand up and fight for it. And we focus the entire movie, it's really quite informative, on really the unprecedented attack on religious liberty in America today. And it's hard to talk about this issue in light of what's going on around the world. Because as you watch 21 Coptic Christians being beheaded, it's hard to talk about religious persecution here in the United States. Because the persecution here is nothing compared to what the crucifixions that are occurring in the Middle East, the beheadings that are occurring, the churches that are being burned, and the priests who are being, unspeakable things being done to them. Yet, America is important. If America is not the beacon for religious liberty, if America does not take this vital freedom that we have seriously at home, then what we see happening with this administration, and potentially future ones, is that we will not be advocates for it around the world. So it is important not only for our brothers and sisters around the world who are being persecuted, but you look at this administration. You don't see them speaking out. You didn't hear the president use the word Christian when he talked about the beheadings. You won't see the president, even his people in his own party are being critical of him of not going out and fighting for religious liberty around the world and speaking up for the attacks on religious liberty. And whether it's a few people who get killed in a deli randomly killed in a deli in Paris, right? If you don't recognize the persecution that's going on around the world, you allow it to grow and prosper. And I think what's happening here is we see, in a sense, what's happening in America with the government now fundamentally changing its relationship, and society seemingly acquiescing to this concept of separation of church and state. And I asked a group of kids yesterday 2 questions, these kids. I asked them a question, I asked them to close their eyes, put their head down, so they couldn't be influenced by other people voting next to them. And I asked them how many, I'm going to give you 2 phrases, which phrase is actually in the Constitution. And I gave them the phrase separation of church and state, and the other, the free exercise of religion. Now thankfully, although maybe I shouldn't be thankful, 2/3 said free exercise of religion. That was actually higher than I thought. But 1/3 said separation of church and state. And I asked them a second question. I asked them, where do our rights come from? In America, where do our rights come from? And I asked them again, put their heads down. I said, I'm going to give you 2 options. And I said, actually I didn't say that. I said, let me give you some options. Because I wanted to see what their reaction was. And I said, first, rights come from the government. About 15-20% of the kids raised their hands saying rights come from the government. And then I said rights come from God. Laughter broke out. All over the place. Laughter broke out. And a few spackling of hands went up. I'd say 75% of the kids didn't raise their hand for either one of those. They have no clue as to where our rights come from. And why would they? When do we ever see our people in public life, much less in the popular culture, much less in our educational institutions, with a few important exceptions, talk about where our rights come from, talk about the importance of God in America. And as a result of that, we are raising a generation who is untethered. They're not grounded in anything that leads them to understand what America is all about. And so it's not surprising to me to see these attacks that are now taking place on religious liberty in our country are not being resisted by, you'd think, a group who would be more motivated than others, because young people tend to be motivated by things like this, and they're not. We see, we detail in the movie, systematic attacks, everything from, and of course, the most frequent, centers around the issue of marriage. This is, as I warned a long, long time ago, quite to the detriment of my political career, that marriage, this issue of marriage is, while not as foundational as the issue of life, obviously, life is the most foundational issue. It is the one that will have the most toxic ramifications to our society. And the reason I say that is, well, as toxic, maybe not the most, as toxic ramifications as the life issue. Because it will destroy the last two redoubts of American traditional culture, of what made America a unique place in the world. Every other major institution in this country has been lost to the left, the secular left, by and large. Starting with academia. I know this is an exception, but you know you're an exception. Academia was lost, and when academia is lost, that means the elites who are educated are eventually going to be lost, which of course they are. And so we have the media, which of course is a highly educated group of people who run the media in this country. So the media is lost. Corporate America is lost. Now primary and secondary education is lost. The popular culture is lost. All from the seed of academia, where all of these leaders and all of these organizations come from. What's left? Two things are left to stand up for the values of our country and for the notion of God-given rights and religious liberty. And that is the family and the church. And the issue before us on marriage will ultimately bring both asunder. That's why it's so important. That's why they're fighting so hard. I don't think this is a movement that is necessarily driven by people who have same-sex attraction. I think this is a movement driven by people for a long time who want to see this as the opportunity to get the victory, to completely secularize this country. I always talk about how America is a descendant of the American Revolution. The people who are fighting the battles against us are descended from a different revolution, the French Revolution. The French Revolution, as you know, agreed with us on liberty and equality, but they didn't agree with us on God-given rights. They believed rights came from, well, liberty, equality, and fraternity. From each other, from our brothers and sisters. And Europe has descended from that. Look at the European Union, no God. Look at Europe generally, no God. It's because it's descended from a godless revolution that Bonaparte spread throughout the region and became the dominant factor in the development of Europe in the last 200 years. And they are bringing it here. This is the fight. And they are going to go after the family, and they are going to go after the church. And they will use this leverage. And so while young people should be standing up and fighting, because they are sympathetic on this issue, because the popular culture has so convinced them that a change in marriage is a matter of equality and decency, they don't see the rights that are being taken away from them. They spew from these vaunted elites is actually absorbed by the public, and it's devastating to them. So I wanted to just share with you what I think is a critical issue in America today that is not being talked about. The reason we need to talk about it, the reason we need to be informed of what's going on, because it's still in its nascent stage. There are two examples in our movie, One Generation Away. One is a florist in Washington State. The other is a cake baker in Oregon. And actually, things happened just recently on both of those cases, both having to deal with participating in a same-sex wedding ceremony. And the cake baker in Oregon was found guilty of discrimination, fined $150,000 by the state of Oregon, and told that she needed to be rehabilitated in the United States of America because she did not want to participate in a ceremony that was against what she believed. Same thing is happening now in the state of Washington with florists. Same thing. A judgment just handed down by a judge that she is discriminating. She broke a criminal statute. You think this cannot happen in America? It is happening And most don't know about it. We have a fire chief fired in Atlanta, Georgia, because he wrote a book talking about his religious beliefs, and he was fired. I can give you example after example. I'm working with a group of pastors in Houston, Texas, where the mayor of Houston imposed a bathroom bill. You all know what that is. Imposed a bathroom bill in Houston, even though 85% of the people in Houston are against it. They signed a petition and got 50,000 signatures, submitted them to the office to get this on the ballot. The person whose job it is, the secretary for the city, signed off, and then the mayor, when she found out about it, she had her lawyer go down and invalidated 70% of the signatures. 70% of the signatures. That's now in court. I don't know how the court's going to decide. I can't imagine it could decide any way other than to allow them to have. All they want is a vote. They don't want to give you a vote. We've gone from tolerance to acceptance to condoning to conformity. And that's where we are on this issue. And that is not going to change unless we fight back. And how do you fight back? I always use this example. We don't have Bibles anymore in primary and secondary schools. Why? Why don't we have Bibles in primary? Why is it that the Bible is not taught as the seminal text for the construction of Western civilization, from which we all come from, but it is not taught at all in our public schools? Why? How did that happen? Well, some of you look at your history and say, oh, there's a woman named Madeline Murray O'Hare, and they did all these things, and they went to court. Yeah, that's all true. But why did it happen? Answer, we let it happen. We let it happen. Not you. But there's a few folks here with gray hair, including myself now. We let it happen. Why? Because we didn't fight. We accepted it. What's going on in America right now is a series of things that are eroding our liberties, our freedoms, our religious freedoms. And they're just little bits at a time. And so we simply just say, okay, well, we'll hunker down and do something else. I look at the marriage issue, and most people in the political sphere believe the marriage issue is over, and so it's time to give up. And we haven't even lost. And then we wonder why the culture continues to spiral downward. One of my favorite, I'm sure one of yours, if you go to Benedictine writers, a guy named G.K. Chesterton. You probably know this story, where Chesterton was asked by a London tabloid to write an essay. This was not a tabloid that was a fan of Chesterton's. Thought they would poke at him. He was asked to write an essay entitled, "What's Wrong with the World?" Chesterton said, okay, I'll do it. The next day he submitted the following essay. "What's wrong with the world? I am." Respectfully submitted, G.K. Chesterton. The reason I give this talk to you is because you know better. You go here. You know what the truth is. You've been educated to be able to go out and debate thoughtfully, hopefully passionately, for what the truth is. And I just encourage you to be bold. It's easy to be bold here. But when you go out there, it's really hard. Because you will be seen as a three-eyed monster. Someone who, particularly in your generation, is so out of touch with the truth and reality. It is important that you speak and speak loudly and get involved, and don't take defeat and move on to the next one. Fight. I can tell you the other side wins because they don't give up. They fight. They fight every inch. They don't back away. You might have seen a Supreme Court case the other day in Greece, New York, where they the Supreme Court allowed, in a 5-4 decision, prayer before a public meeting. Wonderful. What happened? 3 cases were filed the following week by the ACLU against other cities. They don't care. They're not giving up. They're going to keep at it. They have a passion. And we're complacent because we're defending turf. They want to take it. Ladies and gentlemen, the Bible says the gates of hell will not prevail against us. that means we're on offense, not defense. And we're playing defense, and we're playing, well, let's just hold on, and if we lose a little bit, hold on to the rest. That is a prescription for failure. So I'm here just to encourage you to understand the stakes that are before you. In the movie, we have a man by the name of Eric Metaxas who wrote a book on Bonhoeffer. And he gets rather dramatic in comparing what's going on in America with what went on in Germany in the 1930s, where the church had a chance to stand up and they remained silent. And when they finally stood up, it was too late. You can say, well, that can't happen here. Oh, really? Oh, really? How many thought Jews would be leaving France after the Holocaust? How many thought Jews would have to leave France today because of anti-Semitism? It couldn't happen. We're a much more sophisticated world. Oh, this could never happen here. Disabuse yourself of that. That it can't happen in America, or it can't happen in this day and age. People are being crucified. People are being beheaded. It can't happen here. Wake up. It can only happen here if you let it happen here. This college is equipping you. Use it. Be bold. Be loving. Remember, Christ's love always first. But take the truth that you have. Do not hide it under a bushel basket. Put it on a lampstand and make it shine. Happy to take your questions.
Mr. Santorum, my name is...
I hope you're not going to quote something I said many years ago.
No.
Because I deny it right now. I've never said this quote.
Yes, let me check on my list. No, my name is Edward Schmaltz. I'm a Catholic school teacher. In San Francisco right now, there's an issue going on. The Archbishop recently passed a bill asking all Catholic school teachers to affirm some core Catholic teachings, including teachings on marriage.
He's a great bishop, too. This is Bishop Corleone.
Yeah.
He's the best.
He's awesome. However, there's this big outcry, this very secular protest and everything against it. How do you believe we can defend our Catholic schools, this outpost, theoretically, of religious liberty in that sense, without coming across as they get for all these things they say?
Well, here, look, people always ask me what my favorite verse is. Of course, no Catholic ever asks me that. But, which is sad, by the way. I'm sorry to say this. I always talk about the Beatitudes, and my favorite one is, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness. You're going to stand for truth, so you're going to be persecuted. Get that. Right? You're not going to be popular. One of the greatest things that disturbs me about the youngest generation is the highest, and you see this in social media. What's the most important thing for young people today? The most important thing you can have? Fame. You do it, you put ridiculous pictures of yourselves just so people will watch you. Fame. You stand for the truth. Infamy is what you're going to have. They'll hate you. They will. They'll hate you. They will call you the worst things in the world. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Make sure you're standing for truth. Make sure you're not doing anything but expressing the truth and doing it in love. I can tell you personally, I always feel like I stood for the truth, but I didn't always do it in love. And you know what? Those are the times that hurt me the most. When you stand up and say things, and you say things not in love, it sounds really ugly. The truth can sound ugly if you say it in a way that's not with love. So that's from the battle scars that I have, is my little piece of recommendation. Make sure we take that step back and you make sure that you're within Christ's love when you say these things.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Maximilian Potts. I'm a student here for studying history. I think that your second most important trying to accomplishment was your Santorum amendment on the intellectual property.
That's a great story.
I'm wondering how
did that happen?
Yeah, how did that happen?
That's a great story. Okay, this is one of my favorite stories to tell. I hardly ever tell it because no one ever asks me about it. So, the Santorum Amendment was done in a bill called the No Child Left Behind bill. A bill that I'm not particularly proud that I voted for. But it was a bill to deal with the educational standards across America and try to increase them so we can improve the quality of education, which turned out to be, in my opinion, a disaster. A bill in the United States Senate, the way it goes, is that you have particularly a bill that's called open amendments, which is how the Senate used to operate, doesn't anymore. Or at least it hasn't for the past several years under the Democrats. It's changing. You have the ability, as a senator, to offer as many amendments as you want on any subject you want. There's no germaneness. You can offer anything at any time. Now, obviously, we constrain ourselves because if you did that, every bill would be bogged down and we'd never pass anything. So what happens is after about a week or so, the managers of the bill come around and say, okay, look, we've had a lot of amendments on a lot of different things. Can we now just say, we're going to have just amendments that are germane? And if everybody sort of got it out of their system, okay, we all agree, we have what's called unanimous consent, and that's now just germane amendments. Great, so that's step one. Step two is, all right, we're going to require that you file the subject matter of your amendment. That's all these are ways of sort of narrowing down and getting this, it's like baton death march to get a bill done in the United States. It takes weeks. And the only reason we end up passing is because everybody's sick of it at that point, right? We need to move on. That's what happens. It's human nature. And so we file amendments on subject matter. So I had an amendment that I wanted to offer. And now this is 2002, I think it is, 2001, 2002. And so I'm by that time known as the leader on the life issue. I mean, I authored the Partial Birth Abortion Bill, I authored the Born Life Protection Act, the Unborn Victims of Violence Act. If there's a major any pro-life piece of legislation, I was the guy putting it forward. And so I offered an amendment to the No Child Left Behind bill, and my title of the amendment was Life. That was it, life. And that's all you have to say. You don't have to really be descriptive, you just have to say what it's about. And so I said, it's about life. And so we're winding down the amendments, they're going through all of them, and they finally call and say, are you going to offer your amendment on life? And I figured it was about a day or two before this thing was going to close up, and I thought, okay, this is a good time. Everybody's sort of tired of it, nobody's really paying a lot of attention. And so I said, sure. So I came down to the floor of the United States Senate with my 2-sentence amendment on life. And I brought it up, I offered the amendment, put it in. Well, I walked down there, and there's Hillary Clinton, Barbara Boxer, Ted Kennedy, Dianne Feinstein, Debbie Stabenow, Maria Cantwell, the entire pro-abortion mafia is there. And they're all just waiting to see, okay, what is he going to do on education when it comes to abortion? So I offered the amendment, they read the amendment, and they all huddled back there, and they're going back and forth, and staff is coming in and out of the room, and I'm just sitting there at my desk, just waiting for them to decide what they want to do. And over walks Ted Kennedy. And Kennedy says, puts the amendment before me, says, okay, we can't figure out how this has anything to do with abortion. I said, Ted, this has to do with the teaching of evolution in the classroom, that when it comes to evolution, you teach the controversy and you don't teach religion, you teach science, the scientific method, and you test things and you present evidence for and against, just like you would any other issue. Okay? So he goes back over, and again, they're huddled over there 10, 15 minutes, staff going in, staff going out, they're trying to figure this out. He brings it back over and sets it down. I said, now, will you promise me that there's nothing to do with abortion in this language. I said, Ted, this has absolutely nothing to do with abortion. This has to do with academic freedom. This has to do with rigorous curriculum. I said, it's nothing to do. He said, I want a promise from you. They talk, they come back down, Ted Kennedy gets up and says, I'd like to be a co-sponsor of this amendment. He said, this is exactly the kind of things that Barbara Boxer gets up, asks to be a co-sponsor of the amendment, says this is about academic freedom, this is the way the Senate should work, that da-da-da-da-da. I said, and they said, we'll accept the amendment. I said, no, I want to vote. Well, okay, sure, we'll have a vote, no problem. It passed 92-4. And the 4 were conservative Republicans who didn't think we should be telling school boards what to do on curriculum. But every Democrat voted for it. Then the Biology Teachers Association of America found out about this and went ballistic. And the next day in the Washington Post was a huge article about Ted Kennedy saying that Rick Santorum had fooled him and tricked him, and that this was an outrage, and that this is this creationism under disguise, and all this horrible thing, and that he would make sure that that bill is never included in the final bill. And now I'm not on the Education Committee, but a good friend of mine happened to be the chairman of the Education Committee. We came into Congress at the same time. We were part of the gang of 7 together. His name was John Boehner. And he was the Education Committee chairman at the time, and he promised me, because I made him swear, that he would stand firm and not take that provision out. And it was the last thing that they fought over, and Boehner held firm, and it stayed in the bill. And so, as a result of that, we had a good thing happen, which a whole bunch of schools reviewed their curriculum on evolution. The bad thing that happened is one school did a really lousy job in Dover, Pennsylvania, and a really horrible federal judge made a decision that actually created very, very bad precedent when it comes to the teaching of evolution in the classroom. So, good things tried, bad thing results. All right?
For Senator Santorum.
Especially excited to have his daughter Elizabeth, who's a UD grad. We're going to give her some Raven gear. You got more kids at home, so we're going to try to get these next Santorum kids going to and we have a gift for you here.
Thank you.
I feel bad we didn't get a sweater vest for you, but we should.
Thank you.
We're going to have an opportunity for you to meet Senator Santorum out by the fireplace and get a picture if you'd like. I'm going to escort him out now, so everybody in the crowd around you can just line up, and we'll get you a picture and say hi to him, okay? Let's hear it for Senator Santorum.